Hey everyone, Chloe from the Chloe Connection here again, and today I wanted to talk about figuring out when to come out to your family. There might be some of you that aren't out yet, and maybe are considering coming out over the holiday season, or kind of torn as to whether or not they should go home, because you might be living two lives if you're not fully out to everyone, and it's like, do you want to go back into the closet when you go back home to visit if you're out in a lot of other aspects of your life? Something that I myself had to consider my first Thanksgiving after coming out, and I decided not to go home because I was not going back into the closet. But in today's video, I wanted to talk about some things to consider to maybe hopefully help in that kind of process of figuring out, is this a good time to come out to my family? Kind of helping you figure out when should I do this? Or even if that's a possibility as well, it might not be something that's important to you to do. It really all depends on the relationship you have with your family. I have one of my favorite family members behind me in the background, Miss Tipsy, as she cleans herself on camera. So I think one of the most important first things to kind of ask yourself, I do a lot of these videos where you ask yourself questions. Maybe it's the budding therapist in me where it's engage in self-reflection. But ask yourself, do you depend on your family? And in what ways do you depend on your family? Because that could determine, unfortunately, whether or not, now or the near future is a quote-unquote good time to come out. And, I want to preface all this by saying there really isn't a good time to come out. It's kind of just, there might be some times that are better than others, but it's a very difficult, or can be a very difficult process, often is a difficult process. So it's kind of one of those things where it's there's not really a great time to do it. It's we sometimes wait for, this isn't the right time. I'm waiting for the right time to do it, and there might not come a right time, and it's kind of why I'm making this video, is asking yourself of, when can you make that time right? When can you make it the right time? Because, this is something you should have control over, when you come out and how you go about it. So it's really about you deciding when that time is and kind of taking that step. Because likely the situation's not going to just fall on your lap. And if it does, maybe that's a good thing. I don't know. But, going back to the first point, ask yourself, do you depend on your family in any way? Specifically, I think one of the big things is, do you depend on your family financially? And I think this is an important consideration for trans people of all ages, but especially younger trans people. For those of you that might be in high school, or those of you that might be in college, in some ways you may depend on your parents financially. Is there that fear that they might cut you out of their life? And cutting you out might include cutting you off financially. It's fucking unfortunate that that's something we even have to consider, but I think that's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. If you feel that they will cut you off financially, I think it's important to do some searching, some digging, and see where you can get those forms of support, or see how you can get by without that support. Do your family support you a lot emotionally? That's something important to consider too, if that emotional bond changes, because that likely will change for the better, for the worse. It might stay similar, but it will likely be at least a little bit different. So kind of asking yourself, is it possible for this to change? Is it possible for this to change in a bad way? And would I be able to handle that if that did happen? All important things to consider. I think the financial aspect is something that's very important to consider, and it's, I think, a big reason why a lot of people don't always come out when they're still in high school or early college years, because they rely on that family support. And kind of related to that, look for indicators that your family might be or is supportive of, trans people, trans identity, non-binary identities, or, maybe even just gay or queer identities, and maybe it'll extend to trans identities. Kind of assess, you hopefully know your family better than I do. For whoever this is directed to, for whoever is watching. So just over time, take that assessment. Do you feel that they are supportive of the LGBTQ plus community, political perspective, or just emotional support, empathy, whatever. Because I think that can give you an indication of, hopefully they might be more supportive. You know, it's always different if they don't directly know anybody, or if they don't have any family members that are out as queer or trans, then, you know, it's still going to hit them harder even if they are supportive, but, you know, they'll have that understanding, hopefully. I believe strongly in creating social support, creating those networks, creating your chosen families. Are there people in your extended family, or do you have siblings that you trust and feel safe with and have a sense that they would support you regardless of who you are and what you tell them? They would be there for you. Because it could be helpful to have that, you know, support network for when you do come out to your parents. You have these other people in your family, or they could be like close friends, friends of the family, you know, kind of they have your back. And they could even help in the process maybe of getting your parents on your side if that is a concern or turns out to be a struggle. And like I said before, you know your family better than I do. You know your family better than probably most people in this world do. Think of ways of how you will come out to them. Is it important for you for them to really understand what you're going through, for them to really understand who you are? You know your family. Try to think of ways that may be approachable. Again, this is all from my perspective. Some of these things may not be important to you. If you feel more comfortable going more into jargony terms that are used more in the community, or if you feel making it more like layperson terms or whatever. I mean, it's up to you, obviously. This is your story. This is your process. This is you. This is your life. You get to decide that. You know, you are the agent of change in your coming out story. And hopefully nobody will take that away from you. Depending on what your goals are, ask yourself what your goals are in terms of coming out to your family. Like, why are you doing this? What do you want? You want a closer relationship with your family? You want their support? You just want them to know because they're in your family, but you don't necessarily need their support. Kind of asking yourself what your desired outcome or outcomes are, I think can help in this process of like, how do you go about explaining it to them? Like, what's kind of the approach that you take here? You know, making it digestible and accessible? Is it short and sweet? Is it going to be long and drawn out? Tune into what feels right based on what you know about your family. And I think last big thing, there's so many things we could talk about when it comes to family, but, you know, we're probably often thinking about like worst case scenarios. You know, as people, we tend to do that. As people who have been probably subjected to a disproportionate amount of negative experience, unfortunately, it makes sense that we might lean towards worst case scenario. That's oftentimes what prolongs the process of coming out to people. Kind of causes us to put off because we're afraid it's not going to be received well. We're afraid it's not something that we can actually do. We're afraid it's not a realistic path for us to come out and live our lives as our authentic selves. But I think it's important to not dwell on it, but, you know, keep that in the back of your mind. You know, consider the scenario, you do come out to your parents, you do come out to your family. What if there is fallout? What if you do get cut out, or your family does cut contact with you? What would you do in that situation? And ask yourself if that is something you could live with. And the answer will probably be, it would be very difficult. I would prefer not to live that way, or it might be I couldn't live that way. But it's kind of asking yourself, like, unfortunately, making that balance between like telling them who you truly are, showing them your authentic self, and potentially having that fallout versus still having them in your life, but having to not be your full self with them. It's kind of like asking yourself what is important. Kind of like the previous part of asking yourself what your goals are with coming out to them. And really assessing, like, should things go bad? How will you handle that? What do you have in place to really accommodate for that? Would you be able to manage that? Those are just a few things that I think are important to consider when coming out to family, considering coming out to family. You know, this is based off of my experience. This is based off of talking to people, kind of like all my videos. This is not the end-all be-all. Some of this may not apply to your experience. All of this may not apply to your experience. But that is one of the reasons why I encourage y'all to comment down below. What do you think about these kind of self-reflection kind of exercises to explore the coming out process and kind of gain that awareness, gain that perspective, kind of go in with more comfort and confidence in kind of what you're doing and why you're doing this in order to live that authentic life. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. What are some other things that you think are important to consider in this coming out process? There are a lot of other things. These are just a handful that came to mind. And there's probably a lot of other things, and if that turns up in the comments, maybe I'll make another video on this. But family is an important thing that comes up around the holiday season. For some of us, family brings joy. For some of us, family brings pain. That's part of the reason why I wanted to make this video. Because this might be on some of your minds. Should I come out to them? Or I did come out, and how do I handle this relationship? On that note, I hope everyone out there is able to have a safe, supportive, loving holiday season. If you are going home to a family or to people that aren't as supportive as you'd like them to be, hope you're able to stay safe. I hope you're able to have other systems in place, coping mechanisms, be able to hopefully not spend too much time with people that drain you, and get back to the people that do love and support you. As always, thank you so much for watching. Tipsy and I love you so much, wherever she is. Bye for now.